Hey, what's up guys? I'm Zora Lightning, and today I'll be telling you about the 14 types of ravines in Minecraft. Now, you may ask, surely there's more than 14 types of ravines, because Minecraft worlds are infinite and there is a near infinite number of seeds, right? Well, no. There are only 14 types of ravines that exist as of 1.17, and this may change with 1.18, but I don't think it's going to, because 1.18 is mostly focused on stuff like aquifers and new biomes and those ugly vines on the snowy mountains. I mean, I love using way too many of them in my builds to make people think my castle is falling apart, but this is ridiculous. Not as ridiculous as this, though. Anyone has used the seed picker in Minecraft Bedrock can tell you exactly where to find this. This is not a ravine. This is a straight-up tear in the earth. But the thing is, this doesn't exist in Java Edition. I don't play Java, so I'm not really familiar with Java ravines, unfortunately, but I do know that they're a lot more common and a lot less deep. And since Bedrock and Java ravines are so different, I think it's best if I restrict this video to Bedrock only. Can you take this knowledge and apply it to Java? Probably, but I cannot guarantee accuracy across versions. Another thing before I dive right in, ravines are not called ravines anymore. The official name for them is now canyon. But is this a canyon? I think not. This is a canyon. Is this a ravine? Well, it's more of a ravine than a canyon, but a simple comparison between a few other ravines will leave this one looking a little out of place. So which term do you use? For the sake of this video, I will be using the term chasm because it can't be a ditch or a valley. This is the only thing that a chasm can be. I guess the words fissure and crack could be used too, but this is not a crack. Is this tear in the earth a chasm? Yes it is. First, I'll be talking about land chasms. There are two main types of chasms, land chasms and underwater chasms. This is the single most important split that we can make between ravines in Minecraft, whether Bedrock or Java. A land chasm is basically just any ravine that isn't underwater. It can be underground or break the surface, and the most common type of land chasm is the standard chasm. It's what you think of when you think of a ravine. It can be above or below the ground, but what makes a standard chasm standard is that it generally has 2 or 3 waterfalls, a little bit of lava, and no obsidian at the bottom, or lava lakes. It can be without water, but if it has no lava, it is instead classified as a dry chasm. A dry chasm is a chasm without lava, and it does not matter if a chasm has obsidian or water, or is 100 blocks deep if it has no lava. It can only be a dry chasm. Nothing less, nothing less. This can also be above or below the ground. The rarest type of chasm is the wet chasm. It is also known as the mega ravine, on chunk base at least, and it does not exist in Java Edition. I call it the wet chasm because it is completely wet at the bottom. The bottom of a mega ravine is always covered in lava and water, no exceptions. All blocks under the water are obsidian, and this type of chasm only occurs above the surface. This is what makes it so rare because most chasms are below sea level. However, it is the easiest chasm to find for the same reason. The fourth and last common type of land chasm is the chasmy chasm. This is kind of the best of all worlds if you need lava and obsidian but want a nice dark abyss. It's basically the underground version of a wet chasm, but it combines the depth of a wet chasm with the dryness of a standard chasm, if that makes sense. It's the shape of a traditional underground chasm. Observe this chart here. Shape A is the typical standard or dry chasm you find above ground, and shape B is a wet chasm, with those sharp corners going all the way down to lava layer. Shape C is any underground chasm, and shape D is mostly underground except for a small part above the surface. This chasm might go under a mountain or a plateau or something, and it's usually a standard or a dry chasm. Now, moving on to ocean chasms. These are pretty basic because, as you may know, there's no lava underwater. There are two types of underwater chasms, the standard chasm and the chasmy chasm. There aren't any dry or wet ocean chasms because, of course, everything's wet. The distinction between standard chasms and chasmy chasms is pretty simple. Chasmy chasms have magma and obsidian and go all the way down to Y level 11, and standard chasms don't. Well, they can go down that deep, but they won't have any magma or obsidian. And that's every basic type of chasm. But so far we've only got 6, and of course there's 14. So where do the extra 8 come in? Well, our next category of ravines is overridden chasms, and starting off we have the cutoff chasm. This happens when a ravine, usually one that breaks the surface, is overridden by a river, and this cuts the ravine in half. Usually this only happens once, but sometimes if you have a very windy river, it can get a little ridiculous. Next up is the chasm with mineshaft. This is pretty self-explanatory, as it is literally a chasm with a mineshaft. It's got maybe 1 to 3 bridges tucked away in a corner, but not too many. This is in contrast to the mineshaft chasm, which is just like the chasm with mineshaft, but with more bridges, usually smack in the middle of the ravine too. Finally, we have the stronghold chasm, and that's pretty self-explanatory too. It's literally a chasm with a stronghold. And these are supposed to be uncommon, but somehow I ended up with one in both of my survival worlds within a relatively short distance. But we're still not finished, because what about the double chasm and the triple chasm? I could go on, but I'm sure you get the idea, and after 3 it's really best to just say chasm system. The only time you shouldn't do this is when you have an infinite chasm. This is the famous ravine we know from seed 16693200482, where all the chunks repeat, as you may know, because this is a very well-known ravine, but there's others, of course, and you can find them in other repeating seeds too. This is the same seed, but it's a different ravine. This one is an underground chasmy chasm. It's infinite. Alright, we've reached 14. But there are still a few rare types of chasms that I just have to talk about. First is the river chasm, and I'm not talking about a cutoff chasm. What I'm talking about is when an ocean ravine, usually a mega ocean ravine, which by the way is the same thing as a chasmy chasm underwater, when one of those, it doesn't have to be a chasmy chasm though, it can be a standard chasm. When an ocean ravine goes into a river partially. These are really, really rare, and it usually happens when the bubbles from the magma blocks in a chasmy chasm mine away the sand at the bottom of a riverbed, and it creates this weird crossover between ocean and river. And like I said, it's really, really rare, and even I have only found this once or twice. If you have a world with one of these unusual ravines, comment the seed and the relative coordinates, and I will give you a shout out in my next ravine video. Another rare ocean chasm is the water pool chasm. This is an ocean chasm, whether standard or chasmy, connects with a water pool in a taiga biome, which can look pretty cool with magma bubbles. And it's not as rare because water pools are pretty common, and the ravine doesn't necessarily have to be chasmy. I mean, in the last one it doesn't either, but usually it is. But next we've got the overlay chasm, which is really just, all it is when a ravine is on top of another ravine and they connect. Pretty much. That's pretty much it. But the last type of chasm we have is the ice spike chasm, and this is an interesting one because it's not quite underground, but it doesn't break the surface because of the snow blocks in ice spike biomes. The ice spikes in the snow still spawn even if it's a mega ravine, even if it's a wet chasm, which, as you may know, because I just told you, those are always above the surface. But in an ice spikes biome, the snow and ice spikes will still spawn on top of the ravine, and the ice spikes will come down, and it creates this really beautiful effect sometimes. And that's pretty much it. Of course, I'm not going to mention dungeon chasms and amethyst geode chasms, because after a certain point it just gets to be like, is this really another type of ravine, or is it just a ravine that's got something in it? Which you could, of course, argue for the stronghold and mineshaft chasms, but I feel like there's a line that we sort of have to draw after those structures. I guess when it gets to the point where in a repeating seed the structure repeats with the chasm, then there isn't really any point in including it. And I'm definitely not going to mention a village chasm, because those are just a different level of cool. But anyways, thank you for watching, and have a lovely day with the new features of 1.17, and I will try to make more Minecraft videos, and also if you like the mashups, I have more coming.